Okay, we are May 17th, Business 17, Personal Finance, Chapter 10. And so we're going to be looking at all this stuff, home insurance, automobile insurance, etc. So what is insurance? Insurance is protection against possible financial loss. One of the things it does, not the only one, but one of the things it does is give you peace of mind. When I say insurance, what's the first thing that pops into your head? What kind of insurance?
Health insurance.
What kind? Health insurance?
Yes.
Car
Okay.
insurance.
Flora says life. And somebody else said something? Car?
Car insurance.
Okay. So, most of us have experience with some kind of insurance. Protection against possible financial loss. Well, in car insurance, what is the possible financial loss in car insurance?
The car.
Your car, somebody else's car, maybe something even worse. You were, driving poorly and got into an accident and really hurt someone, which then brings us to what Esperanza said, health insurance, right? What's your fear with health insurance?
Get sick.
I told you I had a surgery. My surgery was $98,000. That was the sticker price. Now, there's an interesting point where someone makes talking about pregnancy, and they're like, why should insurance cover pregnancy? And they're talking about insurance in general, as in it's not something that happened. Well, I guess it is sometimes, oftentimes. They were trying to make the point that, like, if you plan to get pregnant, why should insurance cover that? Right? Because that's something you willfully did. Right? I'm sure if you took your car and drove off a bridge on purpose, your insurance company would be like, what happened? You're like, oh yeah, I just decided to drive off the bridge. They'd probably try to find an excuse not to cover it. So just kind of an interesting thing. I think the point this person was trying to make is they were trying to harken back to an earlier age when healthcare was completely different. And, obviously now if you go through a normal pregnancy, it can cost $50,000. Obviously back then it was, like $100 or something to go give birth in a hospital. So anyway, an insurance company is a risk-sharing firm that assumes financial responsibility for losses from an insured risk. And when you guys take my investments class, we'll talk a lot about risk. In fact, the whole class is about risk. There's nothing wrong with taking on risk. You just have to understand that you're taking it on and make sure you're comfortable with whatever you stand to gain from taking on that risk. Right? Presumably, the reason you take on a risk is because you expect some sort of gain. So I skydive. Are you taking a risk? Absolutely. Is there a potential gain? Oh yeah, the rush of jumping out of an airplane, whatever. Are you driving your car? Are you taking a risk? Well, of course. You assess it as relatively small, but the benefit is you now have the freedom to go anywhere. You can have a job, you can go to school. You're not dependent on all these other things, etc. There are people who will take on risk. These are insurance companies and then people beyond that, and they are willing to take on a risk in exchange for money. Right? Esperanza says, basically, I'm just going to drive my car tomorrow. I'll drive it less than 10 miles. But I don't have car insurance. I just want car insurance for the day. I'll pay $20. Okay, based on her history, all these other factors, we can assess, okay, the odds of her getting in an accident tomorrow are pretty low. So we will take $20. Obviously, you want to do that with millions and millions of people. People purchase a policy. The firm assumes the risk for a fee called the premium. This is paid periodically. In car insurance, you can pay it monthly, you pay it every 6 months, whatever. And you say, okay, I'm buying a policy which lists out all these terms of what I'm allowed to do, what I'm not allowed to do, what risks are covered, what risks are not. If you intentionally drive your car off a bridge, there's probably something in the policy that says, yeah, we're not going to cover stuff that you do on purpose. Kathleen, pregnancy is a pre-existing condition. That's kind of funny. Is that how they term it?
Yes, I have learned from my own experience.
That's funny. Types of risks. Risk is uncertainty or lack of predictability, such as the loss that a person or property covered by insurance faces. Peril is the cause of that loss. A fire, a windstorm, explosion. Anyone here from Chicago? I used to own Section 8 housing, like near the Wisconsin border, north of Chicago, and it was just horrible, horrible. You'd have rain, you'd have high winds, you'd have snow, you'd have drought. You had basically like every kind of natural disaster. You didn't have earthquakes. So that was the one good thing about owning housing there, but everything else was just complete nightmare. Hazard increases the likelihood of a loss, such as defective house wiring, or, oh, I built my house in an area that floods every 10 years. This is something that people complain about with all of the California wildfires, because the government has said, okay, we are not going to let insurance companies charge whatever rate they want. So imagine that you're an insurance company and I want to build a house in an area that has a massive wildfire every 3 to 5 years. Would you be happy about that? Me building a house there?
No,
Why not?
because the risk is going to be,
Yeah, the odds of my house burning down are probably somewhat high. So how would you compensate for that? I said, I'm going to build a house that's $2 million. And it's in this area that has a massive wildfire every 3 to 5 years. And obviously I'm going to buy the insurance. And if my house burns down, you have to build me a new one.
so what is the question?
The question is, are you going to insure my house?
Yeah, but the premium is going to be higher than
Okay, why?
another area,
Why would you charge a higher premium?
because it's going to be a higher risk.
Yeah, the odds of my house burning down in the next 10 years are pretty high, aren't they? Now, in what we would consider a free market, I go to build my house there and I say to you guys, okay, I want insurance. Let's say my house is $1 million. If my house burns down, you have to buy me a new one. And you guys sit there and look at all the data and go, okay, well, it's likely that his house is going to burn down almost certainly sometime in the next 10 years. My house is $1 million to build. You're going to want to charge me a high premium, correct?
Yes.
Well, what if you say, okay, you know what? Housing prices go up, the cost of construction goes up, within 10 years, we're almost for sure going to have to buy you a new house. So we're going to charge you $110,000 a year for insurance. What would I do?
100,000.
Am I going to want to pay $100,000 a year for house insurance?
No.
So what am I going to do?
Not build the house there?
I might not build the house there.
Or build it in another area that is not
Maybe
so
I go
risky.
somewhere else, right? Now, imagine that the government steps in, you guys are the insurance company, and the government says, hey, you know what? You're not allowed to charge Eric more than $2,000. Otherwise, that's, wrong, it's price gouging, whatever. And then what happens if you're only allowed to charge me $2,000? What do I do? Am I going to build the house?
Yes.
Of course, right?
1,000 is not too.
And now you have taken on a big risk. But maybe I should not have taken on that risk. The only reason I took that risk on is because you were not allowed to charge the price that you wanted.
Mhm.
So I took on this risk and passed it off to you. And you have now taken that risk and you're not receiving enough money for it. Pure risk. The most common risks are classified as personal risks, property risks, liability risks. An insurable risk should have a chance of loss and not gain. Accidental and unintentional risks. Sorry, this slide's pretty bad. Nature and financial costs of the loss can be predicted. Right? So you insure my house. Okay, well, you know what my house looks like. You know what it costs to build. You have an idea what it will cost in the future to build that house again. You won't know for certain. No one knows for certain, but you have a pretty good idea. I have a 2,000 square foot house with a 2-car garage. You're like, okay, we know how much that costs to build. Speculative risk is chance of either loss or gain, starting a small business or gambling. So in an insurable risk, there's no gain that comes out of it. If your house burns down, you get a new house, but you're just back to where you started. You're not really any better off. A speculative risk, you start a small business, you could lose money or you could make a bunch of money. You gamble, you could lose money gambling or you could make money. These are considered uninsurable type risks, the speculative one. Risk management methods. Risk management is an organized strategy for protecting assets and people. Again, there are people who are comfortable taking risk in exchange for money. So if you want to get rid of your risks, you can give them money and they will take that risk on. You don't have to buy fire insurance. I mean, if you have a mortgage, you do. The bank will make you. But if you paid $1 million cash for your house, you probably don't have to have fire insurance. What happens if you don't buy fire insurance and your house burns down?
You lost everything.
Your ass down.
Yeah, right. If you want a new house, well, you got to pony up the cash to build a new one, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
That's why people like us, most people are like, hey, you know what? I live in a normal area. The odds of my house burning down are pretty small. It's $500 a month for house insurance. I'm fine paying that, right? The odds are that your house will never burn down. But are you upset when you've lived there for 20 years and you paid $500 a year? Are you upset that your house didn't burn down?
No.
No, you're probably not, right? Unless you do like someone I know whose dad had a restaurant and the restaurant wasn't doing well and the restaurant burned down. That's a different story.
Yeah.
My friend's like, oh yeah, just amazingly, all of the like expensive antiques and stuff were taken out of the restaurant to be cleaned before it burned down. Sure, the insurance company. Actually, my friend, I told you he has an insurance company, and when he first started out in the business, he worked as a claims adjuster. So he would go and look at those kinds of things. I don't think he actually did like arson and stuff like that, but he would look at these things like, is this real or is somebody trying to scam the insurance company? So risk management techniques, risk avoidance. We'll try and avoid taking on that risk. Don't build your house in a high fire area. Don't scuba dive. And if you look at travel insurance, if you go overseas. So when I lived in the UK, my insurance was only good for England. And if I went on vacation anywhere, I would have to buy insurance. And there is basically the normal insurance, which is obviously doesn't cover the US because it's way more expensive here. So it's like, oh, you're going to Italy. Okay, you're allowed to, under this insurance, you can surf, you can windsurf, you can do that, but you can't parasail, you can't do skydiving, whatever. And it had a list of things that were specifically not covered, right? If you don't want that risk, then you can just not do those things. Okay? Risk reduction. Okay, well, I'm going to drive, but I'll wear a seatbelt. I'll put smoke alarms in my house. That won't prevent my house burning down, but it will at least alert me when I'm in the house or whoever's in the house. eat a balanced diet and exercise. Right? That doesn't eliminate your risk of diabetes or a heart attack or stroke or something like that, but it should reduce it, all things being equal. Risk assumption, where you can take on the risk. Risk shifting, where you transfer the risk to somebody else. A deductible is the set amount that the policyholder must pay per loss on an insurance policy. So you get into a car accident and the insurance company says your deductible is $500. The first $500 comes out of your pocket. If the total bill was $5,000, well, the next $4,500 comes from the insurance company. What is the purpose of a deductible?
To offset some of the costs for the insurance company?
Some of the costs, but also to prevent like small claims, because processing them is work and this and that. And you know, if you get into it, a little fender bender with somebody and it's $175 for you to fix your car part, are you going to file an insurance claim?
No.
No, you're either not going to fix it or you're just going to pay for it yourself.
Mhm.
Because even if you did file an insurance claim, they would say, oh, okay, all right, well, the deductible 500 is yours, so you have to pay the 175. And what's worse, now we've noted that you already got in an accident, so maybe you're not as good a driver as we think you are. So planning a program, set goals, develop a plan, put it into action, check your results. It's kind of the same slide, excuse me, over and over in all our different topics. Property and liability insurance. Major disasters have caused catastrophic amounts of property loss in the US. Hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, billions and billions of dollars of damaging. There was that, I think, was that during George W. Bush? Was that Hurricane Katrina or something in New Orleans?
Mhm.
Right? And I think a lot of this stuff has to do with, you know, people building so much in areas that where people didn't used to live, right? I mean, you look, you know, imagine, when was that big San Francisco earthquake? 100 years ago or so, early 1900s?
Mm.
You know, imagine if that earthquake hit today, right? How many people are living there now? What's the value of all this stuff there now? It's probably astronomically more than it was 100 and something years ago. I've read things like that as well, as far as like, you know, if you've ever been, I've been to New Orleans once, and like the whole place is basically underwater already, right? So I can imagine it doesn't take very much to cause a big flood. You know, they build their cemeteries above ground, because otherwise it'll like get flooded or whatever, and all the dead bodies come up. That's nice. So main risks related to a home and an automobile are property damage and your responsibility for injuries to others and their property. Right? So your home gets wrecked from a fire or a flood, your car gets into an accident, or you hurt somebody or damage their property with a car. And those are the main risks there. Potential property losses: houses, cars, furniture, clothing, other personal belongings. Do you ever see The Simpsons where their house burns down? And the insurance guy is there and he's like, oh, okay, so what was in the house? And Homer's like, well, let's see, we had that Picasso painting. I think we had a Rembrandt in the dining room, etc. Nobody? A bunch of blank squares that I'm
I don't
seeing.
like the symptom.
Well, you should like them. All these things we discussed, they cover. Risk, there are different kinds of risk. Physical damage, so things that are caused by hazards, fire, wind, water, destruction of property, or the temporary loss of use, as opposed to the permanent loss of use: robbery, burglary, vandalism, arson. So I had insurance, so I have this Airbnb. The pandemic hit, and I had no bookings for March, April, May, June, right? 4 months. And then I had bookings in, you know, July, August, and September that were at like 50% of what they would have been otherwise. So I call my insurance company and I go to file a claim. Anyone here ever tried to file a claim with an insurance company?
And they give you the runaround.
Okay, so Jorge, who wants to give us an example of what they went through?
I mean, I got in a car accident one time, and then they just gave me like, they kept on sending me or calling me about the whole situation. I'd give them everything I needed, and then it was Geico, by the way. And then they were just like giving me this crazy runaround, and eventually it just ended up finally getting fixed like a month, 2 months later. And so I just gave them up and I switched companies, and I never dealt with them ever again. It's like when I
Okay.
actually needed them, they weren't there to actually help.
Well, this is why insurance is such a great business, right? People pay you premiums every month or every 6 months, and then they go, oh, okay, I've had an event. I want you to pay for something. And the insurance company's like, no, look, we don't do that. Our job is to collect money from you, not to pay it out.
Really?
Well, I mean, they don't say that, but that's how you make money in insurance, right? You don't make money in insurance writing checks to customers, do you?
Well, you see, I've had a different experience. I wrecked my truck maybe about right before I got my new car, and I called my insurance. They called the adjuster. I got to drop it off at the shop.
Mhm.
Picked up my rental the same day. Got the check within 3 days. My insurance, I've never had any problems with them. I've heard people have the runarounds and have so much going
Which
on.
company?
State Farm.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, different people have different experiences. I had State Farm I own rental properties, and I, had about, when did I have them insured? I had quite a few. And then I had 2 or 3 floods. Basically, tenants like effed up the washing machines, and then they flood and this and that. And State Farm's like, we're not going to cover you anymore. Anyone
Wow.
ever been dropped? So they paid out, but then they dropped me and they said, we're not going to cover you. Because, my premium for each place was like $600 a year. And then, it floods and it's a $3,000 bill because you got to cut out the drywall. You got to, pull up some flooring and this and that. And I don't know. All right. Okay. Liability. Liability is legal responsibility for financial costs of another person's losses or injuries. Right here, I gotta turn this down. I'm hot. Whatever. Negligence is the failure to take ordinary or reasonable care. Failure to supervise children in a pool. Strict liability, a person is held responsible for intentional or unintentional accidents. And this, you can get into these things. Let me finish this last one. When a person is held vicarious, when a person is held responsible for the actions of another person. If my child goes and does something to someone down here at the pool, well, obviously they're not going to hold the 5-year-old responsible. They're going to say, you're his dad, you should have been watching him, et cetera, et cetera. This is where firms get in trouble when an employer is held responsible for an employee causing damage. I think that's now, we talked about this in my other classes with social media, where employers like, hey, you work for Starbucks, you can't go and post whatever on Facebook. And this is something, I thought there would be more interest in it, in that topic for discussion in my other class, but there wasn't. And they're kind of like, yeah, whatever. For me, I'm like, hey man, if you work at Starbucks making coffee, like, what do they care what what you do or say? You're not an executive of the company, but whatever. I think a lot of students feel differently. I was a bit surprised by that. So, homeowners insurance coverages, house and other structures, garage, tool shed, the landscaping, etc. You'll often have additional living expenses. So I told you I have this Airbnb in Marina Del Rey. Probably once a year, I'll get someone who's in there because they had a flood or a fire. I get a lot more requests for it, but the terms don't always work out because they usually want to move in right away. Hey, I just had a flood yesterday, and then they don't really know how long they want to stay. I want to stay, I don't know, maybe for weeks, and I can't. That doesn't really work for me. But that's generally what it is. Oh, my place had a flood yesterday. My family needs to move out. There are 5 of us, and obviously you don't want to stay in a hotel if you're, 6 people for 6 weeks, something like that. That's I can't even imagine that. That'd be horrible. So what the insurance company will then pay for your living. So I think I've only done it once or twice where the insurance company writes me the check. Personal property at home or while traveling. So high value items like an engagement ring, a Rolex, et cetera, household inventory. Usually you have to have some kind of documentation. You can't be like Homer Simpson and say, oh yeah, I had a Picasso, but I don't have any receipts for it or anything. Just check. One of my students last semester had a bunch of valuables in his house, so he bought extra insurance. I went and looked up where he lived, but I couldn't find it. No, I'm joking. But that's the kind of thing is you need to, if you have a lot of valuable stuff like jewelry or something like that, you'll want to look at your policy and see what's covered. Because if you have $200,000 worth of jewelry and diamonds and gold and all of that stuff, and your house gets broken into and it's gone, the insurance company might say, oh yeah, well, your policy says $10,000 of personal property. And they'll write you a check for 10 grand and the other 190. It's too bad. So you would have to buy more. And they'll say, how much do you want to buy? You want to buy $50,000 worth of coverage, 100,000, et cetera. You can do whatever you want. It's just going to cost you more. Medical payments, minor accidental injuries on your property caused by you, your members, or pets. I don't know anyone who's ever had this, specifically. Maybe they've got it as part of a policy, but no one's ever told me about having it that they specifically purchased. I know, so I have apartments and my insurance company lists aggressive breeds of dogs. So what am I thinking of, like pit bulls and Rottweilers and stuff like that. So sometimes I'll get people who say, I want to move in. I have a dog. It's a Rottweiler, but she's very well trained and I have insurance and this and that. And I just tell them, I'm sorry, I can't, because my insurance company won't cover that. So if something happens and their Rottweiler mauls a child, obviously, what's the first rule of this is you only sue people with money, right? And so presumably I've got more money than my tenant. So the person who had their child mauled is going to sue the landlord. Hey, you allowed this to happen. I mean, realistically, I can't see any way I should have that responsibility, like vicarious responsibility, but it's California. So we always have to worry about that. So for me, I just have a blanket policy. And it's like, hey, I'm sorry, you're not allowed to have these 7 types of dogs. And here it is in the policy. There's nothing I can do about it. Most homeowner policies have basic personal liability coverage. I don't know anyone who's ever bought more. Umbrella policy, also called a personal catastrophe. It supplements basic liability, and you so hold on here. So Kathleen, having an Airbnb, how do you go about the squatter law? Someone stays there. Yeah, I knock on wood, I haven't encountered that yet. The good news is that stuff is, so all of mine, even people who I advertise on Zillow, when people reach out to me directly, I still route it through VRBO. I would then put that on them and see, I don't know. I mean, I guess they've got their credit card info, but I don't know. Fortunately, I haven't had to.
Oh, you're lucky. Okay. I was just curious.
Yeah, I think the squatter laws are pretty lax. Like you just have to get a piece of mail delivered to you and something else, and then you don't have to leave.
Well, I know it was during like the thick of COVID. I don't know a lot of people were doing like, the squatter, like they were squatting in a lot of people's places, and it's still pretty prevalent, now in real estate.
Now, wait, when you say, do you mean squatting or do you mean like rent forbearance?
Well, so like the Airbnbs, like if it's 29, like if it's 30 days or over, then I guess people are saying they like invoke the squatter, like they're squatting, and there's other obviously situations in like, real estate where like elderly people can like squat in someone's, if they're like renting a room or they're leasing, they have rights as elderly people that they can't be kicked out. But I know during COVID, a lot of people were taking advantage, of that law to like stay in their place.
Yeah, well, see, I'm when you talk about the COVID, I'm thinking of the eviction moratorium.
Eviction law.
Yeah.
Which is different. That's you're living somewhere, you're paying the rent, and then COVID hits and you go, okay, I'm not paying my rent anymore.
I know like the eviction like blanketed a lot of like LA. Like I live in LA County, but I know blanketed a lot of LA City. And it covered a lot of like homes, like apartments. There were, it was, under the discretion of the landlord to approve that or not. My landlord did it, but so he basically lured it up, and if anyone was gonna fight back, then they're gonna fight back with him. But
I mean, in that scenario, there, like as a landlord, there's technically nothing you can do because the state basically said we are not going to process any evictions.
Yeah.
So there's nothing you could legally do as a landlord. The difference being the tenant technically still owes the rent.
Correct. Yeah.
So
correct.
I know it's like I heard this story secondhand of people, 3 guys who were just like, oh yeah, we're not going to pay our rent. And then it was, a year later, and the landlord's like, okay, look, you guys owe whatever it is, $40,000. I want you to move out. This is like a month or 2 ago. And they go, okay, how about we give you like 15 or 20 grand? And the landlord's okay, fine.
Yeah, I know. I just, know some landlords or, heard of some landlords were like finding other loopholes to like evict their tenants, regardless if their tenants, or of that.
Yeah, see, and look, that's up to people what they want to do. I wouldn't do that because in this situation, I mean, I was fortunate. I just basically, my place was empty for 4 months. So I let some friends stay there for free. But, I wouldn't, because I was worried what would happen. But, I wouldn't try and circumvent the law like that because they're going to come down. I mean, if the state goes to such lengths to say we are not going to process any evictions, and then you go and illegally evict someone, I mean, they are going to come down on you like a ton of bricks.
Yeah, I know. It's just some people, they just.
But I have students. Yeah. I have students who, 1 or 2 semesters ago were like, oh yeah, my mom. I literally had this student call me, and she's like, my mom basically, came home and she was renting a room, and the person threw all of her crap out on the street and changed the locks.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
So I put her in touch with my lawyer friend, and I'm not a lawyer, so I didn't get too involved. But yeah, I mean, I know people did that.
No, I know. I definitely saw witnessing and talking with other agent friends. There was like an influx because I know people that own their own, just like you, do their Airbnbs, and squatters were just, they're definitely like a high inflation of them. So during COVID.
Yeah. And these are things that, you don't expect to happen, but more often than not, any kind of normal insurance doesn't cover this. My insurance policy laughed when I was like, oh yeah, I want, business continuity insurance or whatever. Basically insurance is like, oh, well, if you wanted that, you had to specify a pandemic. I'm like, what?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're one of the lucky ones. You went around it smart. So thank you for.
I mean, I'm not lucky. I'm out like I have a 3-bedroom place in Marina Del Rey, right? I'm out 4 full months of rent plus another 4 or 5 months of half rent, right? Like I'm out an absolute crap load of money, right?
Wow.
And I got $10,000 in PPP. That's nothing, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, Jorge, my place was booked for the woman was going to book it. It's people from Hungary. They're going to pay 15 grand a month in May and June, right?
Yeah.
Got zero
They
for it,
didn't.
right? That's why I'm so
Yeah.
pissed off that these clowns at Boeing, they mismanage their business for a decade and then get bailouts and government guarantees, right? I didn't mismanage my business. I don't get a bailout.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't want to get too far off topic.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for the question.
Breathe.
Appreciate
Sandra,
it.
I have office hours every Tuesday. If you want to chat about that. Also with the quizzes, as I've said before, this is new, this textbook for me. So I've, pulled all the questions out of there myself. I'm making them harder on purpose because some of the other classes I taught where I used another professor's stuff, they were too easy. If everyone gets 100% on the exams, that doesn't tell me anything. But if there's a spread and some people are getting 30, 40, 50, others are getting 70, 80, 90, 100, then I can at least see who's got the material under their belt and who's struggling. Right? So maybe I should go and post those things. But I'm probably going to curve the quizzes. But we'll see when we get to the end of the semester. Remember, you get to drop your lowest quiz grade too. So earthquake insurance can be obtained as an endorsement in addition of coverage to the homeowner's policy. So you'll always get a letter from your insurance company every year. They're required by law. Hey, you can buy insurance. Another guy knows an insurance company. He's like, there's not going to be enough money. If a big quake hits, like that thing will be empty, that earthquake fund. So I don't really know how useful that is. Here we go. The National Flood Insurance Program basically gives you cheap insurance to build in a flood zone. Well, what's going to be the result? People are going to build in flood zones, and there are going to be a lot more losses due to floods. Right? This is a national program, so that means it's not priced correctly, almost certainly. This earthquake insurance, I'm not sure of the pricing on that. Anti-concurrent causation clause, wow. Gives insurer the right to reject your claim if your home is damaged by several factors at the same time. Wind and rain, because they're unable to determine which factor came first and caused the damage. Does that sound fair? So do I have insurance if like wind destroys my home? Yeah. If rain destroys my home? Yeah. Okay. Well, what if it's wind and rain together? Ooh, yeah. Well, I don't really know about that. So I fortunately have not run into this, thank God, but I would be furious if that happened. Renter's insurance. This is something you guys should be looking at depending on where you are in your life and your career. Protection against financial loss due to damage or loss of personal property, right? So there's a flood. And then you come to me, your landlord, and say, oh, I want you to reimburse me for this. I'm like, hey, it's not my fault. Right? You're the one who tried to stuff, a chair leg down the garbage disposal and then turn the water on and then decided to go, out with your friends. And then your place flooded and you're like, oh, my beanbag chair was destroyed and now you owe me the money for it. Right? So generally in leases, they will require the tenant to have renter's insurance. And more often than not, it's not enforced, but that clause is there so that when you come after the landlord, say, you owe me money for this, I turn around and say, well, according to your lease, you're required to have renter's insurance, so that will cover it. And say, oh, I didn't have renter's insurance. I go, okay, well, then you're in violation of your lease. It will give you additional living expenses if you have to move out or something. There'll be some personal liability. A building owner's insurance usually won't cover the renter's personal property. And like I said, only 4 in 10 renters have insurance. Excuse me. Only 4 out of 10 renters have insurance. Most don't. but it's in most of their leases. People just ignore it. It's not expensive. You probably should get it anyway, especially if you have anything of value. Because otherwise, someone breaks into your house and steals something, and then you call your landlord whining and crying and asking for money. And it's whatever, it's not my problem, right? You should have had renter's insurance. Different forms. Those are fascinating, yes. So, cost factors. Look for a policy with full coverage rather than a co-insurance where you have to pay for part of a loss. Right? So find out, what are they going to cover? What is your responsibility going to be? What's going to be more expensive to buy? Full coverage insurance or co-insurance?
The full coverage.
Why is that?
I don't know exactly the difference, but for example, in the car, when you have a lease, you have to have a full coverage in your car. Well,
So
it is
full coverage, yeah, full coverage is going to be cheaper because the insurance company eats the entire loss. Co-insurance, they only eat part of it.
oh really?
And for you to file a big claim means you're going to have to pay a significant amount too. How claims are settled, actual cash value, the payment you receive is based on the current replacement cost of the damaged or lost item less depreciation. So if you have a house that's 50 years old and never been touched and it burns down, well, they're not going to give you the money to buy a full brand new house. Because they go, well, your house wasn't at that stage. Your house was really old. So we'll pay you money that will almost be like giving you back that house. My probably best insurance story was, you know what a repo man is? They repossess things. So my friend and I, we used to cycle a lot when we were in high school and college. And I don't know how, but we somehow met up with this guy who was a repo man. And he repossessed a bike shop, went out of business. And so we bought bicycles from him for, I want to say $300, $400, something like that. And I took mine to Washington, D.C., this in San Diego. I took mine to DC. And then I was moving back after the school year, and someone broke into my car and stole my bicycle. And that's how bad DC is, right? Like you leave your car and the bike. I was gone for probably 15 minutes max. And the insurance company wrote me a check for $2,800. Because they said, all right, list out everything on your bicycle and how old it was. And I told the truth. They're like, okay, here's a check for $2,800. And I was like, oh, it's the most money I'd ever had in my life. But that might not always work if you buy a $2,500 bicycle and then 5 years later, they're not. Compare that to replacement value, where you receive the full cost and depreciation. Oops. Am I back? It's lagging. Depreciation is not considered. Okay, what did you have? I had this bicycle. Okay, here's the money to buy a new one. They may limit the replacement cost to 400% of the cash value of the item, and it costs about 10 to 20% more. Sorry, 1 second. This air conditioning is not working. Okay, there we go. It's just on fan. All right. Determining how much coverage you need. What's it cost to replace the home? What's the value of the contents? What liability do you want? And then do you have any particular specific items? Jewelry, furs, silverware, antiques. I'm sure we all have a giant fur collection that we're worried about. Factors that affect home insurance costs. The location of the home, the type of structure. Is it brick? Is it wood? Is it stucco? Whatever. then the coverage amount and policy type. The higher your deductible, higher cost to buy insurance or lower cost?
With a low deductible?
Well, if you have a high deductible, so let's say you have a $500 deductible now, if I can spell deductible, and it is $1,000 a year, and you want to move to $1,000 deductible. Is your insurance bill going to be less than 1,000, the same, or is it going to be more than 1,000?
Well, every time the deductible goes up, your monthly payment goes down, right?
Yeah, they're going to charge you less because, hey, you're willing to assume more of the risk, right? More will come out of your pocket up front, so we will charge you less. Reducing the cost of your home insurance. You can have an alarm system, a smoke detector, a fire extinguisher. You want to see my one for my rental policy? Yes, no?
What, the alarm system?
Let's see it.
Yes, sir. Let's see it.
This is what I did last semester, because I'm like, you know what, we can sit here and talk about this stuff, or I can just like, you know, show you what I have. So let me see, how do I open this? So let's just do. I gotta make sure there's nothing incriminating in here or something crazy that you guys see like, oh, and then I see myself on Instagram or Twitter.
So how
Okay.
much less do you pay with all the items you have on there?
We're gonna show you right now.
Okay.
All right, so this is for my Airbnb. So I have to buy special, so I'm normally through USAA, but they won't cover an Airbnb. Right? So for USAA, it has to be normal 6-month minimum leases. So here are the deductible options. If I have $1,000 deductible, my cost, this is per year, is $2,000 for my insurance. Now, when I lived in this place myself, my insurance was, I want to say, $600 a year, right? So you're looking at 3 times the cost to have an Airbnb, right? Because why?
Too many people.
Hey,
It's
someone
going
starts
to be-
fire.
Yeah, I mean, people just, you know, people just, you know what, I know, any of you ever gone to an Airbnb?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then when you're there, you're just like,
Yes.
oh, I'm just going to take all this silverware and throw it in the trash.
Of
Right.
course.
I'm just going to break all kinds of stuff just for fun. Right. I assume
Yeah.
that's what people do because that's,
I mean,
that's what it's.
is not the point of getting an Airbnb? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I mean, it's not the point, Kathleen, sure, but the point is, you know, to go and enjoy yourself. And yeah,
No,
that
I'm
means
just-
trash and
I'm just
tables
joking.
and no, it's funny actually, because we're in an Airbnb here in Mexico, and it's like, you know, it's a very kind of family oriented place, and there's a pool, and it's two bed, and all this stuff. And it's really cool, but it's all kinds of like, all the tables and coffee tables are all glass,
Oh.
right? But my kids are 5 and 2, so they're running around and stuff. And so I'm like, you know, here, let me show you just so you can see. But this is actually gonna, hold on, let's see. Stop share.
Is that a digital background or is that an actual
No. This is the wall. It's kind of cool, isn't it?
Zakoby or someone? Oh,
No, it's like Julius Caesar or something.
Yeah, I wasn't asking about that too. Like, was this lurking
But,
thing?
but look,
Julio Cesar.
this is a glass table here, right? That's a coffee table with a glass table, right? So it's like, you know, that's not designed for
You can get some
kids.
pool
And so
noodles.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, I put these chairs around the corners, and so my girlfriend was staying here with her friends, and then her friends left, and so I came down with the kids. So we're kind of moving the stuff around. I'm like, okay, this isn't going to work, right? And so she's like, oh, well, I'll take this glass countertop and put it in the closet. And she's like, bam, and breaks it.
Ah.
And I'm just, oh, shit. Right. So I don't know what that's probably going to cost more than the whole Airbnb. So, yeah. But that's why it's more expensive, right? Because, people, and I just had somebody move into my place now, and they're like, oh, the fridge doesn't work, the freezer doesn't work, it's beeping, and he eventually figured it out. But, it's when you move in and it's furnished, so everything belongs to me. So the amount of stuff I have is higher. And then the people there, it takes people a while to figure out how to use stuff. So you have that kind of, learning curve. So again, $1,000 deductible cost me $2,040. If I want a $10,000 deductible, I mean, that's a terrible deal for me. Right? I save $400 a year.
That ain't even worth it.
$10,000.
That's crazy.
Right? That's a terrible idea. So I have this one. And then, okay, do you want to become a certified safe short-term rental? Self-inspection, and I don't know what else. Oh, you can install water shut-off devices. It's a high-rise building, right? So, one leak, ruins 3 places. A noise monitoring device, parties from your renters. Oh, I thought that was for gunshots. So anyway, so that's that. Let me see what else I can find there. That's just the deductible, but you can see, so here's the okay, so let me go down here. Okay.
Does Airbnb require you to have that insurance?
No,
No, but
my condo does, but I mean, I would have it anyway.
Yeah.
All right, so here, this is the actual policy for my Airbnb. I need to look what GL is. I'm not sure. I have to look up. 1,400 is the property, plus this GL, we'll look that up. Policy fees, I don't know. Oh, no, it's just taxes, so that's not very useful. So here, okay, so general aggregate limit, 2 million. Each occurrence is limited to $1 million. 1 million can go to any one person. Damage to premises rented to you. I'm not sure what that means. I don't know what that means there. Personal liability is not covered. There's your wind deductible. Okay. It's the description of it. Okay, so now we get into the fun stuff. Special form does not apply to acts of destruction or theft by any person who has leased the property described to use. What that means. Oh, no. We will pay up to $25,000 for loss or damage to covered property on premise listed in the declaration caused by water that backs up from sewer. My building's old, so I'm probably going to tap them for that. Vacancies deleted, theft of personal effects. I don't have anything valuable in there anyway. Placement costs, loss assessment. Oh, this could be interesting. Miscellaneous real property. Okay, so bed bug. Wow, look at that. You get bed bug coverage. We will reimburse you for the actual expenses and loss of business income you incurred due to infestation of bed bugs.
Wow.
What's the loss of assessment?
Wait a minute. The coverage is limited to the actual expense you incur to hire a professional and inspector. Okay. Okay, they'll pay you for 7 days. Is this interesting for you guys?
Yes.
Looking at this or no? No point. I don't want to go through all this if you.
No,
So
it's
business
nice.
income, what it means. So this basically, this is what I tried to invoke with the pandemic. I've lost income as a result of the pandemic. And they're saying, no, that's because this is designed for, like, there's something that happens to your unit and now you can't rent it out. Right? You had to suspend business operations because there was a flood or a fire or something like that. And they're saying the pandemic is not one of those things. Property, send business income, extra expense. So basically it's just, anyway. So it's, the whole thing is 97 pages.
So if there was another pandemic and you already know this information, could you purposely flood the place so that they could pay you money?